All right, we're live.
We're live.
All right, welcome everyone to HBCU The Startup. I'm B, and this is my co-host,
Franklin Weldon.
And we are so happy to have y'all on today joining us. We have a very special guest with us today. Our guest is the Chief People Officer at Shyp, Jabulile Dayton. And before we get into her story and allow her to tell us who she is, we just want to remind you all to be asking questions. If questions should arise, please know that the Q&A box is on the top of your screen, so check out that 9-square box on the top of your screen, and there's a Q&A icon. Click that and drop your questions, and Franklin and I will be moderating and making sure that your questions are answered. So, Jabu, do you want to tell us who you are and tell us your story?
Okay, sure. So my story is definitely not one of the straight path. I am the person that sort of went out there and failed a few times. Did a corporate thing with a retail company in Seattle for 13 years and left and went to South Africa to start my own company. Epic failure. Came back with no money in my pocket and wound up getting a job at a very little known company at that time called Airbnb. I was the first HR person there, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to a company called TaskRabbit, and I was also their first HR person. And I've sort of built a career around doing this with very small stage startups that are scaling rapidly. And Silicon Valley has been very good to me. I would love to see more of us out here, and so I'm looking forward to talking to everyone.
Excellent. So something based on what you were talking about, so a lot of us, it's kind of our first time being within the startup world. So a lot of us don't really know the kinds of roles that we'd be looking for. So let's say that I came from the finance role. How would I really be able to find a role that's parallel with my interests or finding something that I'd be good at? Seems kind of like a scary experience.
Excellent question. So the first assumption may be wrong. It may not be parallel with your with your desires or your experience. I'll give you an example. When I started at Airbnb, I was 40 years old. I thought of myself as sort of an established, not executive, but definitely manager, director level after about 13 years of HR. And I started in a role that was sort of a typical startup role, very ambiguous. I think it had like 3 sentences in the job description. It was just nonsense, right? But the title was customer service strategist. And it encompassed everything that I knew how to do. And the company concept I fell in love with and was really passionate about. Part of that was I was traveling and working and kind of trying to figure things out on the fly. So the concept of building a community through staying in people's homes really resonated with me. So first step, it may not correlate to the title you're hoping for or even really the job that you're hoping for as it might in a corporate experience. It might just be, and it might actually be something that you consider sort of below your experience, which is frequently the case. So for example, in finance, it might be a payroll role. It might be accounting. It might be something really basic that you have absolutely no intention of doing for the rest of your life. But if you're hungry enough to work for that company and that's the only access you have to breaking into their finance department, it's definitely going to be the way that you do that. So kind of coming in with a little bit more of a humble perspective, approaching them with everything you know how to do, and then getting your foot in the door. When I started at Airbnb, within 3 months of me being there, I had moved from that strategist position to managing the customer service team, and then on the 4th month, I was asked to be their first HR person. So literally, it's a very fast-paced culture, and if you can prove yourself and really jump into it and hit the ground running, you're winning.
Thank you. And so we just want to remind folks the Q&A toolbar on the top. Feel free to drop us some questions so that we can ask Jabu on your behalf. And so, yes, just remember, drop your questions and we'll be moderating through those questions. So, Jabu, can you tell us what does Shyp do?
Yeah, so Shyp is a really cool app that you download onto your phone. And I don't know if you guys are like me, but I hate going to the post office. I literally will like not send something for months, even once a year, just to avoid like that whole process. So you take a picture of something that you want to ship. Let's say you want to ship your phone. And we come pick it up. We wrap it, so you don't need, it could be a stack of t-shirts, it could be, a computer, it could be anything. We wrap it up carefully and then find the lowest cost carrier for you so that everything's sort of taken care of. Obviously, this is something that, does better in a tight urban setting where people are sort of used to using services like this. So we are currently in San Francisco, LA, Miami, and Chicago, and New York. So definitely check us out if you're in any of those cities.
Thank you.
One thing that you talked about a little bit earlier was being passionate about the company's purpose. Could you talk a little bit about how to kind of find the correct company for you?
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question. This may sound a little patronizing, but I always look for something that's fun to me. And something that resonates with me personally, something that I would use myself. So to be honest, when I first looked at Shyp, I was like, ooh, it's shipping. Like, what? Why would I be interested in that? All the other spaces that I worked in were collaborative marketplaces and really empowered people to create businesses with something they already had. So Shyp didn't initially resonate with me. What resonated with me was the people that were working there at the time, the executive team that existed, and the fact that they were smart enough to know that they needed HR when they were still only 16 people. So the culture is what resonated with me. But typically, I think if you're looking to break into the startup world, I would definitely start with a company that reflects your values and reflects a passion of something that you have, rather than approaching it from sort of a more dry analytical space. I think the whole reason to be in the startup world is that it's a space that is a little less restricted. You can be more creative, you can be passionate, you're kind of joining a tribe, so to speak, and a family or a team, depending on the culture that you're going into. And so make it something that's fun and resonates with you organically. That would be my suggestion.
So, Jabu, I'm wondering, so you just said something briefly around aligning your values, well, making sure that the company that you're looking after is in align with your, I would assume professional values. And so when we think about the experiences of people of color, specifically Black folks, trying to navigate the startup world, where we're so severely underrepresented, what advice do you give Black folks specifically? Because is it enough to just, have that alignment in terms of your professional values? How do you, where do you negotiate your personal values, or how you show up as a Black person?
Yeah, you guys have great questions. Thank you. So I actually don't have too much of a difference between my professional and personal values.
Okay.
And that has made my life more difficult. I think had I been able to separate those, life would have been a lot easier for me. But for me, those things live here for me. So I look for companies that I am proud to work for. It doesn't mean there's going to be other people like you there. So the normal sort of way that you might, approach a corporate setting is by finding someone there that you know through someone else, and then sort of initiating a conversation or a mentorship or getting suggestions from them. Here's a space that's very white and Asian, and very few women, very few other types of people of color. And how do you enter into that space and kind of open the doors? Well, interestingly enough, I feel like there's actually less limitations on me being successful in the startup world than there are in the corporate world. And some of that may be just my own personal, feelings about how to enter into a space. But I typically want to be in a space where I can build something and I can design something from the ground up. So if you have some of those attributes for you personally, they can apply professionally in this space, if that makes sense. So for you coming from academia, you've probably done things, designed things and built narratives and, told stories from A to Z. The startup space is a beautiful space to do that in as well. You do have to enter into the space with quite a bit of confidence in your abilities. You can't really show any kind of weaknesses. You've got to be really forthright about what you can accomplish. I would say it typically fits better if you're kind of an A-type personality, except if you're interested in like engineering or some other role like that. But you really need your game to be as tight as possible when you walk in that door, and you need to leave no doubt at all that you can do the job. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I would only pursue things, and this applies for anything in my life, that resonate with me. And I wouldn't waste time on anything else. The startup world is a good example of a place where you have thousands of companies. It's unlikely that you're not going to be able to find something that speaks to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you think that that kind of attitude kind of resonates well with working well within kind of an unfocused, kind of unstructured
Ambiguous
environment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can and it can't. So it really, I think the best thing to do, and of course this isn't what I did, but if I could go back in time, you want to make sure that the company reflects your values, not that you are trying to integrate into theirs. I think this is particularly, like, African Americans already know how to do, we already know how to work within ambiguous spaces. We already are highly sensitive to what's happening when we walk out of the door. I mean, we have to be. We have to protect ourselves. We have to make sure everything's okay. And so we're constantly reading people's faces, body language, different ways that they say things, the tone, how welcoming they are, how welcoming they're not. Use all of those skill sets that you have basically to survive in the United States to walk into this space and own it. Because what those are skill sets, and I don't know if we always think about them that way, but rather than thinking of yourself as sort of a victim of these things, which we all have been, think of yourself as someone that has additional skill sets that a white guy your age and your experience does not have. And when you walk into the room, you use everything you have to analyze how well you're being received. Is this a place you want to spend time, and how much energy you want to put into it? And if it's not, you get the hell out. And that's what I would say, is that not every place is going to be an open door, but what place in America is. So you find the place where they can look at you and say, Franklin, you have the experience and the knowledge and the personality and the culture that we want, and we're going to hire you. Don't waste time trying to mold yourself into something that is not truly you, because it won't be comfortable, and there's really no reason to. So it's kind of the opposite direction I would give to someone that was maybe looking for corporate or no offense, but academic role, where it's like, you want to come with a certain, you have to bring a certain type of face, a certain type of energy. You might need to dress up. Like, literally in startups, if you wear a suit to the interview, people will think you're like the cops or the IRS or, the FBI. So you have to, like, do some research, get in there some way to, like, figure out what the people look like, how they feel, but ultimately just be yourself and be comfortable and be confident. You, at this stage of your life and career, have enough skill sets to actually dominate any startup culture that you want to work in. And that's the truth. Sermonizing, sorry.
No, it's good.
There's a lot of passion. I definitely appreciate it. So, keeping this the theme of around diversity and inclusion going, are you able to speak to the diversity initiative that Shyp may be doing? And what do the statistics look like at Shyp?
Yeah. So obviously, with me being the Chief People Officer, and some people may not be familiar with that title, there aren't a lot of CPOs out there. There definitely, I might be the only CPO out here that looks like me. It's a very rare role, but it's one that I think you're going to see more in the future. So I would not be comfortable in this space, supposedly being a C-level executive, not making this a mission of my own. And I've worked for companies that I can look back on them now, and they literally reflect none of the culture that I hope to instill in design. So Shyp became my baby in the sense that I wanted it to be something that I haven't yet been able to create. I wanted to have enough power to sit at the table and negotiate the things that I wanted without a CEO who got in my way. So what that means at Shyp is that we already are blowing people out of the water in terms of diversity. We have 2 women, myself included, on the executive team. And while this may not sound like a lot, we have probably, and you have to take this with a grain of salt because we are a tech company, but we're not all engineering. So we have a huge operations warehouse team that is mostly of color and is mostly African American and Latino American. So we're a little unfair in that sense. But not only do we have women and women of color running those warehouses and operational teams, we are promoting them. So I would say it's not enough just to go in and see some faces that look like yours. Are they on the executive team? Are they getting paid properly? At my company, if you come in and don't negotiate well as a woman of color, I'm likely to give you what market rate is. I'm likely to give you what you should have negotiated for coming in. Because one of the skill sets that we typically don't have as people of color is how to ask for money. And let me tell you something, we're the only one in this space that doesn't know how to do that, so it's something that I take very personally upon myself to make sure that we are level setting with everyone that walks in my door. So I would say we have about 14% women on our engineering team. Now that might sound really amazing, but that amounts to 3 people because we're a small company. And we have 1 brother of African descent who's an engineer, and then we have 1 brother who is in a data analyst role on our operations team. And then, like I said, most of our operations team in the actual warehouses is actually of color. So we have nothing to be ashamed of. We're not Twitter. We are far advanced, and it's not just because of me. These are the values that my CEO has and my executive team. But I do think what typically happens, even with people that are lovely and wanting to do the right thing, is that if it's not something that you in your life have to think about or be concerned about, you lose focus. And so there have been a couple times, and luckily I own recruiting, but there have been a couple times where I've had to sort of steer the boat back in the direction of, are we fairly, looking at everyone based on their work, but also on the cultural perspective that they can bring. If they're a little bit more junior, which typically is an issue, say, with engineers, are we developing a structure on that team that can help support more junior engineers coming in entry level? I don't think it's going to be this way for long, because I think any industry, any sport, any market in the world that Africans or African Americans decide they want entry into, we do end up dominating. So it's only going to be this way for a moment more. I would say in 5 years it'll be more than integrated. But right now it's a bit of a struggle even to find folks. So one of the ways that we're addressing that is we're working with a startup called Code 2040, which specifically looks at engineers who are of African and Latina descent. And even though we're only a 2-year-old company, we're starting our first internship program this summer with partnering with Code 2040, and that's something that we're really proud of. So that's how, it's baby steps, but these are the ways. A lot of times when people do interns, they end up getting hired at those companies. So that's a really amazing way for entry-level folks or students to get into this space and make themselves known.
There was a lot that you said in there, like from the Twitter portion to the portion that you're talking about now with diversity and inclusion, and then kind of finding the people who are really caring about the people. But one thing that I think you brought up that I haven't heard a lot about is kind of the hard skill / soft skill of negotiation. Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if you could comment a little bit more on that. Like, what things could we do now to be able to put ourselves in a better position? Because for a lot of us, we're kind of looking for what's next. A lot of us are trying to break into tech. A lot of us are already in tech, and so how do we actually put ourselves in a better position to be able to ask for kind of what's equal to us, what we should be?
So I'll be honest. I mean, I wish I could just help everybody, because I have friends who have gone into negotiation and gotten 10 to 20K than I could have helped them get. When I started at Airbnb, I was being paid under market, and I had no idea, because it was a lot of money to me coming from this retail company that I was coming from. So I was really ecstatic and happy about it. And probably within 2 months of me being there, working these 7-day a week, 16-hour days, the recruiter who hired me just started laughing. And you know that feeling when somebody's laughing at you? Somehow you know the difference. And I turned to him and I was like, what are you laughing at? And he's like, I can't believe you took that. And he meant he couldn't believe I took the money that I took, right? So even though it wasn't done in a very friendly way, I learned from that moment. And I never made that mistake again. So when they offered me the HR position, I went and did my research. And I got about $70K more than what they originally gave me. So, and so again, it's like it's on us, obviously, to do the research. What is market research? Sometimes you don't have an entryway to figure that out, so you just Google, what is the pay rate for a financial analyst in San Francisco? And you can see well enough what it should be, and then you kind of balance that out with how many years of experience do I have legitimately, what do I think I can ask for. And then in my experience, when I start businesses, because I have a couple on the side, I go to people who are already doing what I do and I ask them. And people love sharing information. Like, I would help anyone that asked me for help, and that's typically the reception that you will get. And it is like, it's a little uncomfortable to talk about money in our culture. It's not something that we really respect, and people think you're bragging. But I've gotten much more open about how much I make so that people understand how much they can make. Because in the 5 years that I've been here, I've gone from one type of pay to something that I couldn't have imagined I would be able to ask for. So everything is possible within this space. I think starting in an ask mode that is reasonable, but still beyond what you would typically expect. Usually people ask for, men typically ask for 10K more than they think they're going to get. Women typically ask for 10K less. I see this every day. And so making sure that you're holding yourself to the way that I did this with myself, because I was not raised in a family where money was something positive, was every new job that I got, I committed to myself I would either get 20 or 30K more than I'd had in the last job. And I just forced myself to do it. I do it with my consulting clients as well. It may just be $10 more an hour, but like, I thought I was Big Willie asking for $300 an hour until I met a white woman who was asking for 1,000. So guess what my new goal is, right? So you just keep pushing yourself. Like, no one else is going to do it. You could stay at 70K for the rest of your life, or you could be at 130. What's appropriate for your role, your experience, and your background. But this is a marketplace that's very competitive and very hungry for African descent and Latino folks. So while it may not feel like the most comfortable space to play in, I would definitely jump into the water and give it a shot. You again, like, I guess the main part of this story that I want to share is, like, I feel like I'm singing a Drake song, but I started from nothing, in essence, compared to the salaries of my colleagues, and I was able to turn that around in 4 months. So if I can do it, anybody can do it, and that's the truth.
At the risk of sounding corny, now you're here. But also, speaking of which, for all the viewers, you can actually ask questions at the top bar, the 9-block square. If you click on that, you can click Q&A and then enter in questions, and we'll ask them for you. That did sound corny.
No, not as corny as when I said it.
Trying to take notes of all the gems that you're dropping right now.
I know, right? Science.
I encourage you all to do the same. Take notes.
Well, I will say this is an important piece that I was like, I got to get this in. You have to be comfortable with your nerdiness. You got to be comfortable just being a little bit of a fool, because this space is all nerds. All nerds. So, embrace your nerdiness. Doesn't mean you have to be like a dumbass, but just be open to being a little less restricted in your behavior, because it will be welcomed here.
So my next question for you is, for those people, say you currently live in North Carolina or something like that, and you're not necessarily in the center of it all as it relates to tech culture and startup. How do you make your way? Where do you begin? How do you start?
So I'm channeling my mother right now, but I never much listen to her. So mom says, save up 6 months of salary, rent, everything you need, and then move and give it a shot. Jabu says, because I came here with about $1,000 in my pocket. I wasn't too sure how I was going to get dog food for the dog. So luckily I was able to negotiate some relocation money, and even though I wasn't able to find a place to live for a year, just because of how insane San Francisco is, excuse me, did I say a year? I meant 3 months. and I ended up in Oakland, which is something that I think people should consider. But the company ended up paying for my rent those 3 months. Now, this is not typical, but anybody could see how hard I was working, and the company was hitting a pivotal point where all of a sudden everybody knew about us. So they had no problem helping me get settled. They didn't know I only had $40 in my pocket by that time, but they knew I didn't have time to look for a place to live or some of those basic things that you have when you have evenings and weekends. So they helped me out. So just even like living in a world where you can imagine going to your boss and asking for that, like even that is just huge, right? And very different from what might be available in North Carolina, no offense to folks there. But it's kind of thinking completely outside of anything that you know. I will say it's very expensive here, so if you're coming in entry level, you're probably going to have 5 roommates. If you are, and you might be in the living room, like you might be the one in the living room. So you just have to kind of, this is an investment in you one day being a millionaire. So you live in for a year in the living room with some crazy, most likely white people, you know, is acceptable given your future goals. And it is a place where you actually can talk about making good money and living well. And that's a different culture. But it's acceptable here to set really amazing high goals for yourself. The thing that I would concentrate on is like, the point of all of this is not to suffer. It's not to put your time in. It's not, you know, it's to pick something that you love so much that working a lot and working with the same people every day is enjoyable, maybe even joyful for you. So it's the journey, right? It's not the goal. We all know that by now. But find something that excites you and passions you and makes you want to give back and change the world.
One thing that I've kind of been blessed to have, like throughout my professional career so far, is somebody who looks like me that I could kind of talk to during work if something happens. Yeah. But a lot of people don't have that, and so from a lot of the friends that I've been talking to within the startup world, like there's nobody else who looks like them.
Nope.
So how can you have a forum to be able to chat about things that are happening at work, whether it's good or bad, or something of the like, within kind of the startup world, because not a lot of people have been afforded same things.
So you talk to yourself. I mean, I went to an all-white college. I was telling someone, like, I dreamed of going to a historically black college. Like, I wanted to so bad. I was hungry, right? Again, grew up in Seattle and went to a school there. But the types of schools that I was looking at weren't represented. They were experiential colleges, you know, yada, yada. So I'm probably more used to it than I should be. But again, I think that's given me some amazing skill sets. You need to find, at the risk of, again, diving into corniness, but like you need to find your internal compass. And you need to believe that no one's going to get in your way, right? And so we aren't going to always have each other to talk to. I think platforms like this allow that, and you end up kind of reaching out to people. They may not be at your company, though. They may not be in your role. They may be, you know, across town or somebody that you meet outside of work. But it is unlikely. Like, I wouldn't go to Twitter expecting there to be black people there. Like, it's never been known for being culturally diverse. So you just need to be more thoughtful kind of about where you end up going. And so Airbnb being an example, I was the only one there for almost 2 years. And if I had spent any time sort of worrying about that, it might have restricted my ability to be successful. So I was overjoyed when we finally got some folks in, but I couldn't spend too much time belaboring it, and I wasn't in a position to control it. So now that I am, I'm creating the type of workplace that hopefully you and B would like to work at, where we already exist here. But fundamentally, you know, we do exist in Silicon Valley. There's not a lot of us here, but there are people that are creating a path for you guys, and you just need to come on down. Or up, wherever you are.
Over.
You know. You just need to give it a shot. Yes, sorry.
No, so this week, and speaking of Twitter, Leslie Miley, former engineering manager at Twitter, wrote a post stating that he left Twitter due to diversity-related issues. Yep. While at Twitter, he took on diversity initiatives in addition to his role as an engineering manager. How should current employees engage, educate leadership on matters of diversity, especially if there's a lack of understanding?
So you should know there's going to be a lack of understanding. These are typically white or Asian men. They're not checking for you. If you think they're checking for you, you're mistaken. And God bless. I'm sure it was a difficult time for him, and it sounds like he's a very moving speaker. I loved his article. I've reached out to him. Like, you know, he's making a statement in a very bold way with a very big company that not a lot of people have the, you know, what's to do. So I admire that. I would say his initial premise that there was going to be anybody else like him there might have been incorrect. So I think it's just, you know, this isn't college. This isn't, you know, it's like, you know, in school I started a African American support group, and we were called Emoja, and that was, you know, we got together and we supported each other. We talked about how bad things were and how we were the only one in that class, and this is not that. This is not that. This is your time to shine and do what you need to do, and once you get to a position of power where you can reach back and bring people, then you do that. But expecting these people to change something that has worked very well from their perspective, right? Because I don't actually think any company that lacks diversity does as well as it could. We know now that companies that are very diverse, both in age, LGBT, lifestyle, and ethnicity and culture, do better. So we know that, right? I think what might be hurtful about the whole Twitter situation is that there are so many African Americans who use Twitter. Yes. And so it's not representing, right? And that sucks. And that is something that I would hold the leadership accountable for. But I don't know, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, choose your battles. Like, if you're, you know, you have your own brand, it will not always be the company that you work for, and it shouldn't be. And that is a very corporate concept that it will reflect you. It won't necessarily, right? We are out here by ourselves. So if it doesn't reflect you, how do you work within that construct in a way that gets you what you need to get to your next step? Mm-hmm. And that's what I hope he finds, is that this is just a beginning of a journey. He doesn't get stuck here, but moves on to a place where he can actually influence the culture and bring other folks in.
Good answer. I'm about to ask a question from the audience, and as a reminder to the audience, we have the top banner, the 9-block square. You can click Q&A and enter in questions there. But this question comes from Laura Reynolds. She says, "Hi Jabu, do you know if any other startups that, in your opinion, are culturally diverse?"
Any other ones that are culturally diverse? Culturally. Depends what you mean by culturally. There are oftentimes many different cultures represented. They may be European, they may be Asian. But it's unlikely, but you asked me if I know of any. Okay, I know of one that is Shyp, and you can check out our career page. There are certainly other ones that are trying, but I have to be honest, Slack is reputed. They did a really cool article on their diversity. And actually, we share investors. There are a couple out there, Laura, but it's not the norm. it's a little bit like the Wild Wild West out here, where companies are just starting, and some of them fail as quickly as they start. So while if you're looking at a company, say like Google, obviously diverse, but not considered a startup anymore, right? So it's not going to reflect that sort of culture that you might be interested in. But if you want diversity, I would say they have it. Facebook, Yelp, some of these bigger, more established companies that are already profitable. And actually, that's a great place to start. If you want to move into the space from a perspective of, there's going to be redundancy, there's going to be other people in your position rather than you being the only one in that position, much less, your culture or ethnic background, then those are amazing places to get your resume straight. Startups my size, you are going to probably be the only one in your position. And that means that oftentimes you have to learn everything as you're doing it. There's no playbook. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there's not many out there.
All right, let us know in the questions if it didn't answer your question. But also, along with that, kind of an ancillary question to that, what tactics have you found very useful as a CPO to be able to attract diversity?
So just talking to folks. There's no science to this. I do wish, one of the things I'm really pushing for, we did this incredible rebrand, and the site looks amazing. We do have bragging rights around this, and so I do want my career page to reflect that, and we're not quite there yet. But that is something, like we all go to the career page to see what does it look and feel like to work at a company. So I want ours to reflect that. I want you to know I work there. I want you to know Ayana in Chicago works there. Ayana is freaking amazing. We have some stellar African-American, African descent people that work for us, and other backgrounds, and I really want to brag about that. Our white people are good too, just so you know.
So if, say, hypothetically, I was interested in Shyp, could you bring us through the application process?
Yeah.
Specifically for, for non-engineering roles. So what
Sure.
happens to one's resume once you or someone on the other end of Shyp receives it?
Yeah, hopefully we receive it, right? So part of the fear that I hear a lot about this is I'm just going to send my resume out and it will go into the ether or some bucket and no human being will ever read it. That's probably a reasonable expectation, unfortunately. So a lot of these companies, the first year that Airbnb was known of, we got 20,000 applications in. There's no way that we could read with our little team all those applications. And so unfortunately, we missed the opportunity to meet a lot of wonderful people. That's going to be the case. Even these little sort of unknown startups that you think are unknown, the community is very small, and if it has a good reputation, there's a hell of a lot of people applying besides you. So how do you stand out? Like the people that stand out, and I think African Americans know how to do this very well, they reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I respond. I might be one of the few C-level execs that does, but if you reach out to me, I will. If I don't, it just means I couldn't. But, there are different ways to get your name. Like there was a young woman this week who is interested in a role in Chicago, and she reached out via LinkedIn plus applying online, right? Because that's one thing. I cannot stand it when people reach out to me and they haven't even taken the time to apply. And then if you have a cover letter option, make the cover letter amazing. Don't follow the script. Just be yourself. Say why you're the best person for the role without arrogance. Just be honest and humble. And you have to know that, right? But do everything you can. I'm telling you, some of these other folks will send care. I'm not saying to do this, but they will send care packages. They will create decks. They will videotape themselves. I mean, be creative. You already stand out. This is the benefit of being an African American. So take advantage of it.
All right. Duly noted. Thank you.
So you mentioned something a little bit earlier about when you only had $1,000 in your pocket and you were trying to figure out what the best place to go to was. And you said that your mom said to just move where it is that you wanted to be able to find a job. So let's say that we don't have that kind of opportunity. and I'm
Yeah.
looking for a tech startup role, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in the Bay Area or something, and even just like to be able to immerse myself within kind of the startup environment.
Yeah.
What's some advice that you have to be able to immerse myself in the startup environment, to find a role for myself, or to be able to
Take anything, take any job you can. Take anything, because again, it's not where you are now, it's where you want to be. So take something, customer service, you know, there are jobs that you would just dread having, but they allow you to understand the culture and core values of the company very quickly. Customer service roles are one of them. Don't expect that it's necessarily going to change too quickly, but like if you're really devoted, Airbnb was the only company I wanted to work for after coming back from Africa. Their interview process was so bad, they interviewed me for 3 months. I met with 20 people, and I could have at any point, you know, probably maybe should have given up and said, all right, let me set my sights on something else, but that's the only place I wanted to work. So I hung in there, and I gave it my every interview. I just got better and better because I learned more about the company. That's where you learn about the companies, through the interview, right? So the more that you do, the more you know what they want to hear and what you should say, and you're refining your pitch all the time. So utilize your friends and family to really like help you develop a pitch and an interview style. And again, like just get your foot in the door. Do whatever. It doesn't matter. Like I think sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm 25 and I should have this title and I should be living like this and I should drive this car. Let me tell you, when I came here and they were paying me that little bit of money, I got a little studio apartment, me and my dog, in Oakland, and it was across the street from next door to Capoeira studio. So I heard drumming 24/7. Couldn't sleep, right? Hated that place, but it was all I could afford. And I drove my little Toyota Yaris, bright blue. It was the only color that was left. I couldn't stand that car, but it was good to me, for 3 years until I could afford something. So I just think like sometimes you got to level set. This is where I am. I'm going to one day be here, and I'm going to enjoy the ride. Like that little Toyota Yaris, not sexy, definitely not attracting any attention except the bad kind, but gas mileage, and it got me where I needed to go. So, you know, being humble, and remember, I was 40 years old when all this happened. So I thought the job was a little bit beneath me stepping in, but I wanted it. I was hungry for it, and just stay hungry.
So I want to go back to, we were talking about resumes, and you, before we got started, you gave us some, at least for me, what I understood to be some amazing feedback around when you're submitting your process and how it should be framed, how Black people essentially need to be mindful of how they're framing their resumes. And so if you could give, elaborate on that, share with our viewers about what they should be thinking about, how they're framing their resumes as Black people.
Yes. So one thing I think, you know, especially if you're coming from an academic setting, or you've got a few degrees and you've been kind of doing that hustle for a while, this is a very different culture, and typically it's focused on execution. It's focused on what you've accomplished. And we were talking earlier about how typically that's how Black folks are going to be reviewed. You know, we need to have more experience under our belt than maybe some other candidates who might just have the potential because they went to a good school. So considering that maybe your school, like the school I went to Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, people think it's a community college, and they don't recognize it out here because it's not Stanford or Harvard. I don't care. In my experience, just because you came from one of those schools does not mean that you're going to succeed on my team. So what I really want to hear from you is, what have you done? If it was a lemonade stand, then tell me the hell out of that lemonade stand, how you made it work, how you branded it, how you marketed it, and how many people came every day, and how that grew exponentially. Tell me about yourself. I barely read resumes anymore because people can just lie on their resumes anyway. So make it something that's riveting and speaks to your narrative in a way that's going to be interesting to me. And the best way I know to do that is to focus on execution. And think about your personality. Make sure that you're someone that is a little bit more in the A-type personality, rather than someone who maybe is more internal and, you know, I'm actually consider myself an introvert, but in this world, especially in HR, there's no way I can be successful as an introvert. So I have to put my game face on every day and play my little Jay-Z music, and that's how I get in the right space of mind. So do what you need to do.
So you talked about this a little bit earlier about some of your side projects and side businesses. Could you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I have a consulting business on the side. Black folks, we're not happy with one job. We got to have more than a few. And I consult with very small startups, and I take them from the ground up. Usually they're scaling really rapidly, so they're attracted to my experience in that vein. But then I just launched, this is brand new, a travel company. It's a travel experience company. And I want this to be a platform for African Americans and folks from different lifestyles to travel and feel supported and safe. And it's going to be, our first trip is in Brantôme, France, next September. And hopefully we'll be launching the website and the launch email in the next few weeks. So look out for that.
Cool. And so how, you said you're pretty responsive on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what's the best way for us, those of us who are eager, after everything you've shared with us today, for those of us who are eager to get in contact with you?
Yes.
On Twitter.
Don't you all come hang out.
No,
I'm very responsive as much as I can be. Certainly can always return an email. That's my standard for customer service. So please feel free to reach out to me. If I have time to review your resume, I'm happy to do that. That stands for everyone, not just B. And I'll help you make some quick edits. I am not going to spend like hours and hours with you unless you want to pay me. But I'm happy to help given the construct in any way that I can. LinkedIn's the best way.
Okay.
Oh, and that's another point. Your LinkedIn profile, don't come at me with this sort of undeveloped, skinny-looking LinkedIn profile. Amp it up. Get your recommendations, your referrals. I actually do read those when people apply, and you must know people that can write them for you. So make it good.
Cool. Good to know.
That's another thing I wanted to talk about, just kind of references and such like that. What's the best way to take care of that? I might know somebody that works within the startup world or at the company that I want to get hired by. What's the most responsible way to be able to get a reference and to kind of get it looked at?
From them. Yeah, so like at Shyp, we pay our folks to refer people. And we pay them pretty well. It's anywhere from $3K to $10K if you bring me a candidate that we're going to hire. So people are pretty incentivized to bring folks in, and that's typical at startups. And again, just underlines how hungry people are for really great candidates, particularly people of color. So I would reach out to your friend and feel comfortable doing that and just asking for their help and saying, I'm really interested and I'd love your referral. But be ready to get your heart broken a little bit if you don't have enough experience or the attributes that make you a good candidate for them to refer, because they have to think about their identity within that construct as well, right? They can't refer people that aren't ready. And then if they say, look, man, you're not ready, you haven't done nothing in your life, ask them, what can I do to be an applicant here? Like, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it.
So any last minute questions from folks who are tuning in? Remember that toolbox on top, Q&A, click that, drop in your questions before we begin to wrap up. I know, at least for me, I got thousands of questions, but I'm not trying to take up too much space.
We can talk later, B.
Okay, sounds good.
Just kind of a personal question. What got you attracted to the startup space after doing retail?
So in between retail, I had my own company, or actually two, that I tried to launch in Africa, very unsuccessfully, lost all the money I had saved, and was at the furthest tip of South Africa, not sure what I was going to do next. So I think if you're entrepreneurial minded and you sort of want to create, which I think is kind of that core foundation, you will find a way to do it. And the startup world, it enhances all of those skill sets and brings them to the fore. So like if you go to a corporation with that type of energy, it might not be received well, right? You might be told, frankly, get back in your lane. you're talking too much, you're doing too much, you need to just follow your direction and leave us alone, which was sort of what happened to me in retail. So I knew by then that I needed to find a space where I could be myself and people would actually appreciate and support my energy.
Checking for any more questions. All right. So, Franklin, do you want to move to wrap up?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. So first of all, I really wanted to thank you, Jabu, for taking your time to answer all of our questions.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
I really think that a lot of us learned a lot of different things, whether it's from kind of the beginning, like the entry point of getting to a tech startup, to the end of when you're actually there, how to react in those kinds of environments.
Yeah.
I think we definitely learned a lot. Oh, we have one more question. I guess we won't close this yet, but we still thank you. From Jordan Smith.
Jordan.
Speak to your experience at TaskRabbit, culture and diversity, etc.
Oh, you want specifics, huh? So TaskRabbit has an amazing COO, Stacy, who was my boss for about 7 months. Stacy's African American, had an incredible career at Google and Goldman Sachs. She's brilliant. If you get the opportunity to work for her in any regard, you should. I haven't been there in like a couple years, so I don't know, but it was always much more diverse than other companies that I'd worked for. Obviously a woman founder, Leah, who was also the CEO, so amazing opportunity to experience some diversity in actual leadership as well as hopefully in their demographic.
Great. I think that's pretty specific.
Hope I don't get in trouble.
But just to kind of close off, once again, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for co-hosting. Hopefully everybody learned a lot, and hopefully everybody will have something they can take away too.
Lovely. Wow, you guys are on it.
We're listening.
You were. I'm impressed.
And thank you, viewers, for being a part of this. Really enjoyed myself. Thank you, Hadia, for putting this together.
Yes.
Thank you, HBCU to startups. And hopefully you all have a good job next week. And hopefully you're able to share this info with other people.
Definitely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.